This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, March 18th. This is Africa 54. Now, due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate your staying with us on Africa 54. As the global COVID-19 pandemic engulfs many of the world's countries, sub-Saharan Africa's already strained public health systems could become overwhelmed, according to the World Health Organization. South Africa's health ministry on Wednesday said that the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country has risen by 31 since Tuesday to 116. South Africa's foreign ministry says it is banning entry to travelers coming from high-risk countries, including China, Italy, Iran, South Korea, Germany, France, and the United States, among others. Nigerian officials say their largest city, Lagos, could handle up to 2,000 coronavirus cases. Kenya is suspending travel from any nation with reported COVID-19 cases, and only Kenyan citizens, foreigners with residence permits, and United Nations workers will be allowed entry into the country, and then only if they immediately self-quarantine. Ethiopia, Rwanda, Cameroon, Senegal, and Ghana are among other sub-Saharan nations that are also imposing travel restrictions. China is expressing its strong opposition to U.S. President Donald Trump using the term Chinese virus to refer to the deadly COVID-19 disease that has spread to more than 150 countries worldwide. Here's VOA's Cindy Sen.
At a White House briefing on the coronavirus Tuesday, President Donald Trump said it is accurate for him to call the deadly pandemic the Chinese virus, pointing out that some Chinese officials have falsely claimed the U.S. military gave it to them. China has strongly protested the label as the first medical assistance teams start to leave the central Hubei province Tuesday. Beijing says the epidemic has begun to wane in China over the past 2 weeks. Asked how China has handled the crisis, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said,
We know that the first government to be aware of the Wuhan virus was the Chinese government. That imposes a special responsibility to raise the flag.
Some experts said neither the comments and tweets by some Chinese officials or the president's Chinese virus reference are helpful.
It's a virus that originated in China, but I mean, that doesn't make it a Chinese virus, and it also adds to stigmatizing of people of Chinese descent as well.
China announced it is expelling a number of American journalists in retaliation for action taken by the U.S. on Chinese state media based in America. Pompeo said he regretted China's decision to further limit free press operations in the country, saying a free press would be really good for the Chinese people. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
The White House announced it's planning to implement a sweeping economic stimulus package, including the possibility of sending checks directly to some Americans to help mitigate the economic impact of the spread of the coronavirus. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has the latest.
An empty Times Square in New York City as the city scrambled to contain the coronavirus pandemic. Several states ordered restrictions on businesses, including restaurants, and closed schools, while the federal government pushed back on rumors of a national lockdown. However, U.S. President Donald Trump gave more rigorous guidelines for the next 15 days.
My administration is recommending that all Americans, including the young and healthy, work to engage in schooling from home when possible, avoid gathering in groups of more than 10 people, avoid discretionary travel, and avoid eating and drinking at bars, restaurants, and public food courts.
Trump has been criticized for his handling of the crisis, including prematurely touting a Google website that he said would help people determine whether they needed a coronavirus test. But as cases spike up, he has taken a more somber tone and acknowledged it could be July or August before the outbreak is under control.
He seems to be admitting that there is actually a crisis, that it's not going to be a short-term crisis, and that it is in fact going to come with a lot of challenges. I thought today's statement was the most dramatic and the most filled with the most acknowledgement of those realities that everyone else around him has been talking about.
Health experts are applauding the tougher guidelines.
I think people can see that, okay, for 15 days, we can do this. Then if there are positive effects, which there should be, this should help slow things some, then it will be a good time then to reassess and determine, do we extend this? How do we deal with the next phase? But I thought overall that it was a very well thought out plan for slowing the virus and for really focusing our efforts.
The U.S. is a federation, and it's mostly up to states to determine containment measures.
In the United States, healthcare, like education, often is going to come down to where you live and who's in charge of that area, whether it's a state department of health or a school district. These kind of practices in the United States typically are in local hands.
States that have not yet experienced community spread have been slower to act. Despite a national emergency declared last week, thousands still flock to Florida's coastline in Miami Beach.
Hey, let's go to the beach for a week while everybody gets quarantined. They're going to be all pasty white, and we're going to be nice and tan.
The administration has also implemented protective measures, including taking the temperature of anyone entering the White House. Meanwhile, the White House Correspondents Association called on all members to work remotely as much as possible and to keep minimum staffing at the White House, including during press briefings. Patsy Huswara, VOA News.
Investor worries about the economic effects of the novel coronavirus outbreak continued to weigh on global markets Wednesday. Major markets in Asia traded in positive territory for much of the day, but plunged late to close with losses. Japan's Nikkei finished down 1.7%, while Hong Kong Hang Seng Index was down by 4%, and the Shanghai Index finished down 1.8%. Markets in Europe got off to a rocky start as well, with those in Britain, Germany and France all down at least 3.5% in early trading. In Israel, near-empty hotels are being ravaged by the crash in tourism due to the coronavirus pandemic, and many are being set up to use as recovery centers for patients diagnosed with the virus. VOA's Maria Diallo reports.
Israel Tuesday announced it's turning vacant hotel rooms into recovery units for coronavirus patients.
We're opening the first Israeli recovery hotel where we're going to, every corona patient that we identify, we're going to bring them over. 2
hotels, including the Dan Panorama, are receiving patients, and more are expected to do the same. The virus causes moderate symptoms for most people, like fever and coughing, but COVID-19 can also be deadly for older people and those with underlying health issues.
The recovery hotel will accept the folks with mild symptoms, so they won't need much medical help. However, there will be medical staff looking after the patients. And if there's a sudden escalation in the symptoms of any of the folks, usually on day 7, 8, or 9, or 10, we'll bring them right away to a hospital. We are not a hospital.
Israel has more than 300 confirmed coronavirus cases, and that number is quickly rising, triggering fears that number of deaths would also start increasing. Experts predict the toughest weeks are still ahead. Meanwhile, in Spain, the number of COVID-19 cases has skyrocketed and the number of hotel occupants has plummeted. Officials in Spain are also thinking about converting empty hotels into recovery sites for coronavirus patients. The country has more than 11,000 confirmed cases, and the death toll in Spain has climbed to more than 490. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
And now a message from Voice of America Director Amanda Bennett.
I'm Amanda Bennett, and I'm Director of Voice of America. I'm recording this from home because here at Voice of America, almost all of us are now working remotely in order to help slow the spread of the coronavirus that I know has been affecting so many of you and your families. I just wanted to let you know that while the health and safety of our employees is really our primary concern, we also are aware that during this troubling time, you are increasingly turning to us for the factual, unbiased information that you need to make decisions about your lives. So we are working as hard as we can to keep up as much of our programming as we can during this time. You may notice some changes in the shows that you've been used to watching, and some of them may have to go off the air. If that happens, we will keep you informed as to where you can find the content that you're used to seeing. So I'd like to wish you all good luck and good health, and thank you very much. We'll hopefully be here for you. Thank you.
Wool and mohair are the bread and butter of many of Lesotho's Basotho people, surrounded on all sides by South Africa. Lesotho owns 17% of the world's mohair market. But this industry has been rocked in recent years after Lesotho's government struck a deal with a Chinese entrepreneur that turned the wool export business into a monopoly. Wool farmers say the terms have driven them to bankruptcy and desperation. Billions of dollars worth of product they can't sell. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Maseru.
Wool and mohair have been the pride of this tiny mountain kingdom for centuries. But a recent change in the nation's system of brokering sales has wrought havoc on this industry. It all started, says the founder of the National Farmers Union, Wolalefi Moteane, when a mysterious man came to town in 2012 and tried to get a foothold in the industry. Moteane dismissed the man, a Chinese businessman who identified himself as Stone Shi.
Who is this guy? How can he pounce on me on this? Does he have any respect of people? So I then said to Stone Shi, no, I'm able to handle my business. I don't need you. And he walked away. I never, unfortunately, got to get him. In hindsight, this was a mistake on my part, to be able to find out who this fellow is.
5 years later, she secured a deal to broker all of Lesotho's wool and mohair exports. Parliament codified that system into law in 2018, giving Xi's company, the Lesotho Wool Centre, a monopoly. The result, Moteane says, was catastrophic. An untold number of farmers remain unpaid for wool they sold in 2017. He himself has a warehouse with an estimated $500,000 of unsellable wool. Moteane considers himself lucky. Other wool growers have fared worse. Local media reports some farmers have taken their lives.
Would any government, would any country agree to hand over such an important industry to a single individual?
Xi's office did not respond to VOA's request for an interview. Finance Minister Moketsi Majoro says the government erred in giving Xi the deal.
This is a mistake that we have recognized and have moved quickly now through legislation to remove. So we have now opened up the brokerage business to several players. So they have applied, and then there are several brokers now that are dealing with wool. And we have opened up the market to say you can sell any way you like.
Before Xi's company took over, all of Lesotho's wool and mohair exports were sold through brokerages in South Africa. Economist Emmanuel Latete says he understands why the government wanted to shift the business to Lesotho, but says the policy needs review.
It might have had a good intent, but the problem was how it was then introduced and implemented in the market. Did we involve the relevant stakeholders so that they understand the direction the economy was taking? And that involvement, to me, from discussions I've had, might have been limited.
That's definitely true for these men, who came down from the mountains to try to sell their sheep and goats in the capital. At this point, many of these animals are only good for meat, since the wool won't sell. These men didn't want to talk, Moteane explained, because talking, they said, doesn't put food on the table. Anita Powell, VOA News, Maseru.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, a Ghanaian social entrepreneur defies the odds by setting up the first coding and human-centered design school. We'll be back.
My people, now you ready to ride?
Welcome back to Africa 54. Former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden scored decisive wins Tuesday night in the Democratic presidential primaries in the states of Florida, Illinois, and Arizona. As Mike O'Sullivan reports, Ohio postponed its vote because of the coronavirus worries.
Democrats backed Biden by large margins in all 3 states, strengthening his claim on his party's nomination to challenge President Donald Trump.
Our campaign has had a very good night. We've moved closer to securing the Democratic Party's nomination for president. And we're doing it by building a broad coalition that we need to win in November.
With Tuesday's wins, Biden has more than half of the delegates needed for his party's nomination. According to exit polls, he beat Vermont's Senator Bernie Sanders among African Americans, moderates, and seniors. Some switched from Sanders to Biden.
Because a lot of the things that sounded really good were actually a little bit, at this point, I think, unattainable.
Casting a shadow on the election, the spreading coronavirus. Officials in Ohio postponed the voting, saying some voters may not know that they're infected.
And so a person in all good conscience could be going to vote, and they could be spreading.
Polls indicate health care was a major concern among voters.
You know, tackling this pandemic is a national emergency, akin to fighting a war. And it's going to require leadership and cooperation from every level of government.
Some Biden supporters say he wasn't their first choice.
But he was agreeable to me because of his past performance, because of his diplomacy. He was presidential even as a vice president.
A number of other states are postponing upcoming primaries out of concern for the pandemic. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Now to a more exciting story. Every year, the Mother Tongue of Film Festival, sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, showcases films about indigenous cultures that celebrate cultural and linguistic diversity. Most of these films have been made in indigenous languages from around the world. Here's VOA's Penelope Pulu with more details.
Anahi Mariluan, a Mapuche lyricist and composer, stars in the music video Pyre, filmed in southern Argentina. Her lyrics are written in the ancestral tongue of the Mapuche people, called Mapuzungun. This is one of 21 films, each spotlighting an indigenous language, showcased at the Mother Tongue Film Festival.
Mother tongue is a more universal concept, and we've been able to work across topics across the world and cover issues like language recovery, transmission across generations, working through platforms like hip-hop or other forms of music and dance and other cultural expressions.
Many of these ancient languages are dying out. Filmmakers want to preserve them. The short film Uuta means whale hunter in the Nootka language in British Columbia, Canada. Filmmaker Chad Charlie is a member of the Nootka Nation. The story is about a young man who becomes the chief of his village, the chief of his tribe. His grandmother walks him through the lessons and the preparations of being that leader.
Uuta suwasitsk to partly or stoop.
There are about 6,000 languages spoken in the world, and communities around the world are feeling various pressures to conform to dominant languages such as English, Spanish, etc.
Joshua Bell, co-director of Mother Tongue Film Festival, says the event offers a platform to Indigenous communities and their languages.
Elsa!
Over half of the filmmakers represented at the festival are women, says Amalia Cordova, co-director of the festival.
It's not surprising because the transmission of language is often left to the women and in the domestic space of child rearing. So it's the women who are often tasked with the cultural transmission of the language.
Such is the case for Elsa, the young heroine in the feature film Restless River. Set in the 1940s, the native woman from the Arctic Circle gets pregnant after being assaulted by a white soldier stationed there. Despite facing poverty and discrimination in a harsh climate, she raises her son in her own traditions. This feature film is in English and Inuktitut languages.
Vi, you could do amazing things for your people, but you need to cut out all these distractions.
I know what I'm capable of, but you just won't listen to me.
Vi is a coming-of-age story of a woman from the Pacific Islands. Each one of Vi's life stages, from childhood to deep old age, is told by a different filmmaker and from a distinct Pacific Island culture.
Kia ora koutou, ko Bex Arahanga tōku ingoa.
Bex Arahanga is one of 8 female directors who collaborated on the movie.
So the idea is that, it is this woman who comes from all these different places. So, she is that woman, but then she's all of us.
Arahanga says all 8 filmmakers were born in New Zealand and have strong indigenous roots. Vi showcases a variety of South Pacific languages.
An indigenous leader from Colombia recently said, the language is the territory speaking. So languages come from a certain place, from a certain positionality towards the world, and bring you a window into that particular space.
Penelope Pulu, VOA News, Washington. African Women in Technology series, we feature Regina Honu, a Ghanaian social entrepreneur, software developer and founder of Soronko Academy, the first coding and human-centered design school for children, young adults and women in West Africa. Ms. Honu is a former Yali Fellow who used her grant money to help the community. Her academy has trained over 4,500 women and girls to code. Africa 54 tech reporter Paul Ndiho caught up with her in Accra.
So Soronko Academy is a coding and human-centered design academy. We teach children and adults how to create technology, but also soft skills, leadership, entrepreneurship, public speaking, pitching. And then after the training, we also connect them to job opportunities or opportunities to start their own business.
How did you get into this?
So it was a little bit from my own personal struggle. First, growing up in my childhood, being always limited and boxed as a young female growing up in an African country. I mean, when I first wanted to go into technology, I was told it's very difficult, it's not really for girls. I remember at a point in time, I wanted to build a rocket because I watched a movie and a man was able to fly with a rocket. I was told girls don't build rockets and I'll end up in the kitchen. So I really hated being limited just based on my gender without even given the opportunity to try. So really it was first taking myself out of that limit, and secondly seeing the opportunities within digital and technology and thinking that once again we can't leave women and girls behind. They should be able to take advantage of all the opportunities within the tech and digital space.
How does that make you feel?
I'm excited that there will be a domino effect, that these women that we've worked with will go on and transform their lives, their community lives. So for me, it's also about leaving that legacy, because I worked in corporates and I wasn't fulfilled in just the 9 to 5 where like the only person I was enriching was myself. I felt that I could do more with my skills, with my talent. So I actually feel like I'm living my life's purpose, you know, by the work that I'm doing. And for me, it's very uplifting. So I go to bed happy. Yeah.
You're still very young and you're talking about a legacy and fulfilling your long life dreams.
It doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, but it's really about that willingness to make a change or to make the world a little bit better than how you saw it. So for me, when I talk about legacy, it even goes past just what I want to leave, but the legacy of women before me. So there were many women that made sacrifices that allows me as a woman to live the way I live today. So I think it's important that we also do our part to allow the next generation of women and girls to live better than this generation.
Why is it that it's always very, very hard to find women in this space? There are not enough women in the technology sector. And yet, there are incredibly smart women out there. Even when it comes to engineering, we don't see a lot of women. Computer science, we don't see a lot of women.
Generally, once you come into the space, I mean, it is a very male-dominated space, so it can make it a bit of a challenge to sort of find your voice and step out. You will find that there's not a lot of information that goes on about what goes on within the space. Young girls and women need to see more women in the space to also feel like this is a space they can aspire to. We don't see a lot of women in the STEM field, so for a young girl growing up, it's easy for her to think, yeah, I mean, all the people I know in STEM are men, so it's not really for me.
What kind of advice would you give to young women who are looking up to you?
Technology or science and engineering or technology and math is not who you are, it's what you do. So first, let's break that stereotype. You don't become geeky and, you know, you're not like some nerdy type of person. There are different personalities within the tech space. The second thing is you can express your creativity within technology. Think of it as a tool that will help you reach whatever dream or aspiration that you have for yourself. So don't see it as, oh, this is a space that's going to limit me, or this is a space that I have to do so much. See it as a space that will enable whatever creativity you have, whatever ability you have, whatever skill you have. Adding digital or technology enhances it. So see it as really you're going in to learn a tool that makes you better.
Talk to me about the women who come here. What are their backgrounds? What are their aspirations?
The women that we work with come from different walks of life. You have some that come from the informal sector. You have some that are like in school but are not getting very practical education when it comes to digital. You have some that are unemployed and are looking to upgrade their skills so that they can land a better job. You have some that are employed and are hoping to upgrade their skills so that they can get better jobs. And then you have some mothers that are sort of in the transition of what do I do with my life now? How can I still be at home and then use my technology skills to make money? So we have quite a range of women. The most important thing is that the women come in here with the desire to have better lives. And they want to understand what is this whole technology and digital space? How can I take advantage of that space? How can I better myself? Because they know it's not enough to kind of sit now and not understand what's going on in digital or technology.
That was Africa 54 tech reporter Paul Ndiho speaking with Regina Honu, CEO of the Soronko Academy in Accra. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.